Hi, everyone. It's such a pleasure to be here today and to get to talk to you about how we can strengthen consent as our lives move more and more online. First of all, why does this conversation matter? In so many ways, of course, consent is really quite integral to pleasure. And so it should give us pause as love and sex increasingly involve the digital as well, that consent online is really fundamentally broken. Consent is often described as a privacy self-management mechanism. So it allows us to make sure that we live online the way we want to. But it's very clear for all of us that it is failing on many fronts and there is increasing criticism. I think all of us have seen notices that are far too long, too many notices, too much legalese, so it becomes really difficult to comprehend. And there are many more problems like this. Really, then the central problem is that even though we are supposedly consenting, we really don't know what we are signing up for. A Norwegian consumer organization looked, for example, at third-party data sharing by dating apps and found that many dating apps shared their data with hundreds and sometimes even thousands of apps. That's really problematic because apps like Grindr, Tinder, and OkCupid gather really sensitive information about us. They don't just have your exact location and your sexual orientation, but also often information on your religious and political beliefs, drug use, other information, whether or not you are in favor of abortion. And you think you are sharing that information to find a partner with similar beliefs. But what we often don't realize is how many other entities actually get access to this data. And in the case of the 10 dating apps that consumer organization looked at, each app shared that data with at least 135 different companies. And we really have no control over where that goes. All of this is legal though, in the name of consent. And it's really quite remarkable that at the moment, unlike any other fundamental human right that we have, we can simply sign away our right to privacy by ticking a box. If consent online is really so broken, and if that is so obvious to many of us, and if it's so obvious that this is really problematic to many of us, then why are we still stuck with this? Really, the big reason behind this is the way we look at data. Overall, in all debates around data, in policy, in business, etc., data is fundamentally framed as a resource. It's talked about as this thing that is out there, apart from us, disembodied and ready to be mined. And because we look at data in that disembodied way, it becomes a valid means for exchange. So you give your data and in exchange, you get a service. That disembodied view of data does not match our experience though. For example, just think about how targets of the non-consensual sharing of sexual images often talk about their own experience. Most women and queer people who have been at the receiving end of that don't just talk about it in terms of a data protection violation, not even just a privacy violation. Very often, they compare their experiences to sexual assault. And so the sharing of non-consensual sharing of sexual images becomes a matter of bodily integrity. We saw the same in India also when the Suli deals scandal happened, in which an app was built, on which images of Muslim women were put, who were then supposedly put up for sale. Many of the women who were featured on that app actually talked about it very much in terms as a bodily experience. They were very conscious of the fact that this was not just their pictures being put up for sale. It was really trying to indicate that they and their physical bodies were up for sale. So what we see here is that in very concrete and intimate ways, actually our data is almost, it's so interconnected with our bodies that the line between our physical and digital bodies almost become irrelevant. And what some scholars have argued is that we therefore really need to start thinking about our bodies differently. Data is really becoming an extension of our bodies. And so your body doesn't stop anymore where your skin touches the earth. It has many more ways into the world. In data governance, because it really starts from data as a resource, this is not taken into account. And that's why we are not able to think of all harms and possibilities that really come with data governance. But when we recognize that data actually is a fundamental extension of our body, things completely change. Because when we do that, we can look at other areas of consent where the body has been discussed extensively. And one such area is, of course, feminist debates around consent in sexual relationships. We know that, for example, consent is not simply a yes or no that you give at the outset. It needs to be built and be asked again and again in different acts, different situations. It's a process that opens up a conversation. It allows for negotiation, including on the terms of the engagement, and it must be proactive. But perhaps most importantly, what feminism has taught us is that the autonomy in which consent is embedded is relational, not individual, and the broader conditions really matter. We are not automatically free and equal individuals. Consent needs to be created to make that possible. And so this brings to the table really the notion of power relationships. We need to create the conditions so that each individual can consent freely rather than assume this. And this, what is then the lesson for data governance, has to happen online as much as online. At the moment, consent is really online, used as a legitimization of a new set of power relationships, both ideological and in practice, while obscuring a broader set of harms, and the responsibility for these unequal power relations and any harms that might occur is put on us. What we need to do then is really think about consent through a lens where we can make it meaningful, and that will require a fundamental restructuring of our digital environment at many different levels. How that needs to look at exactly, feminism can point out the way forward. Thank you so much.